Hi everyone, welcome to another Innovation Visual Knowledge Hub video where we bring you information on all things digital marketing. Today I'm talking to Chris in our team and we're talking all things HubSpot content management system. So HubSpot is renowned for being an excellent marketing tool and also now into a sales tool and service. But the CMS, the content management system for managing your website, has really gone to the next level during 2020. So today we're going to talk about the 12 things which really are reasons why HubSpot should be your next CMS of choice. So, hi Chris.
Hiya.
Right, and the pressure's on you because I'm going to ask you the question. So I hope you know all 12 things that we want to highlight. And I think the first thing to talk about is about ease of integration.
Yeah. Exactly.
So tell me, like HubSpot CMS, why is it better for ease of integration?
So like you were saying, HubSpot's made up of all these different hubs. And unlike if you're working with a lot of the other CMSs out there, of which there are literally thousands, HubSpot is this kind of all-in-one package. So it's all about this unified view of your prospects, of your clients, data all in one place. And with the CMS, we can start to connect that technology into your CMS as well. So it gives you just transparency of your data that you're not going to get if you're working with, say, a WordPress or something similar. Okay,
so I know quite a few people have obviously connected their WordPress website to their HubSpot, but what we're saying here with point one is much better, deeper integration and much easier integration. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anytime you have to plug into platforms, there's always going to be limitations, there's going to be hurdles, there's going to be additional effort to put in as well, as much as anything else. So having that already in there means your tracking is going to work straight out of the box. You're not going to have to worry about matching specific fields between platforms. It's just going to work.
Brilliant. Okay. And that actually dovetails nicely into point two, which is attribution, lead, deal attribution. Why is that better if you use the HubSpot CMS?
Yeah, again, so it's that transparency. You can see the full journey. So that tracking is working across the site. You know exactly the pages that all of your prospects have been visiting. You know the forms they've been interacting with. You can use call to actions. So you can actually use that as an event that can be tracked and clicked and see that data all the way through the system. So because everything is in one place, you know exactly all those interactions that have been had. It's there's no kind of dipping in and out of analytics and looking at custom tracked events and using kind of Google Tag Manager to hunt things down. It is just there on the kind of contact view and you can see it.
So now with the HubSpot CMS, we're going beyond just like attributing sources and campaigns to the leads. We can now actually look at things like specific call to actions and specific content as this is what drives action on your site. So better knowledge, exactly. So you can make better decisions. Brilliant. Okay. So then if we're going for that next level of performance and we can measure that, tell me about the multivariant testing, because I know that there's differences between HubSpot CMS Pro, HubSpot CMS Enterprise when it comes to, is it A/B testing?
Yeah, so in the Pro you can do A/B testing, and essentially that will let you to do two different versions of a page or a piece of content and allow you to kind of test the effectiveness of that for your conversion rate optimization essentially. When you move into Enterprise, I think it's up to 5 different variants you can do of the same piece, so you can really kind of break out 5 versions of a page and really see how they perform against each other.
Okay, so again, now we've got people who are probably doing multivariant testing or A/B testing with something like Google Optimize, but now what we've got this natively now in the content management system.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is as simple as setting it up, little drop down, move between your different variants, and you can even get it to automatically run the test, decide what the winner is, and move to that as your kind of result or your outcome for your page.
Wow. Okay. That's I think super powerful actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something you don't get with WordPress, that's for sure.
Exactly, and it's out of the box, so there's no complex setup. It's just there.
Brilliant. Okay. So another thing which I think is a really big standout feature compared with the likes of WordPress, and I'm referring to WordPress a lot because obviously that's kind of become like a standard for many B2B websites, is this smart content.
Yeah.
Now, do you want to explain what smart content actually is?
Yeah, so smart content, it's very clever, but in a nutshell, you can use data and behavior about your site visitors to change what they'll see, to display different information. So, you could think of having specific campaigns you're running showing different content for those visitors to your site. So it allows you to personalize, but it also allows you to kind of target. So if you're thinking along the lines of, I don't know, ABM, and you want to target specific industries, you can start to kind of focus how your pages are going to display for those users.
Wow, okay. So this is kind of like the personalization at scale that only used to be in like really high-end CMSs, very expensive CMSs. Personalization at scale by attributes for an individual or groups of individual now. Yeah. So you've got that straight out of the box.
And also with it being HubSpot, it's really easy to use. So, you're talking about those high-end solutions. They still require, a PhD in how to actually set these systems up. With HubSpot, it is just a couple of clicks and you can set these things up. So really clever.
Okay. Well, that brings us to reason 5 to use HubSpot for your CMS, which is editing controls and ease of editing.
Yeah. So HubSpot has always been built from the ground up, for marketers initially and then salespeople to use. And it's a code-free platform in many ways. That doesn't mean there aren't places where you can't build HTML and CSS templates and things, but it is designed for people to be able to go in, whether they're a content creator, a marketer, a developer, and build pages that look great. They're on theme, they're on brand, and they're using built-out responsive modules and templates. So it couldn't be easier to use, basically.
And I think, I've had some experience with this. Obviously, the Innovation Visual website's been running on HubSpot for years, and we've had experience with a lot of other client websites now running the HubSpot CMS. What I actually like about the ease of editing is also you can have things like logic switches, can't you, on these modules? So when you drag and drop a module in, you can actually have a switch which says put the image on the left or the image on the right. Yeah. And you've got really nice controls, so you can import an image into a position and it will automatically size it up for the right thing. So it's very, very powerful given how simple it is.
It is, and I think it's interesting that we referenced WordPress before, because a lot of people have had similar kind of experiences with WordPress of that ease of use. And if anything, HubSpot is even easier. It's a cleaner interface for sure, but it also plugs into all that data we were talking about. So that's why that comparison starts to become kind of more important.
Yeah, and I think another thing in terms of when you're looking at that comparison with WordPress, I think one of the difficulties with WordPress with the controls is actually you can give editors too much control and they can, make a car crash of your brand.
Yeah, so very easy to break WordPress.
Yeah, whereas you can't do that. You can actually do really clever things, can't you, to restrict
the users. One of the big things in the back end of HubSpot is the users and teams. So you can actually create specific teams, give users specific roles, and kind of stop specific people having access to things you don't want to have access to.
Right.
So that comes down to specific tools, specific areas of the platform, whatever kind of you need to limit, you can do.
So that's like the 0.6, this very tiered, very granular user control system. So for example, we deal with a lot of international tech businesses and they're often operating in different international regions. So you can assign USA team a different set of controls than you can ascribe to like EMEA team or Asia Pacific team. So it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if they've got specific pages that have been designed for those regions or designed for, again, going back to the kind of the account targeting ideas, if you've got specific areas where you want one team to be handling acquisition, another retention, or whatever it's going to be, you don't necessarily want them interfering with each other's work.
Okay, that's great. And also then within those teams, you can then also set permissions, so you can have people who can edit but not set live then, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All the way from that kind of editing and creating of content through to the reporting, you can lock it all down at different levels within those teams.
So rather than your, blunt when it comes to WordPress, it's your administrators, your editors,
exactly.
and publishers and things like that. Okay, well that's really good. So then taking that on then to, I think, point 7, the HubSpot CMS is an all-in package, isn't it? Which has everything you need. So explain the difference between like it being all in with this monthly fee compared with WordPress.
Yeah. So I think people will be familiar with things like WordPress, where you have to have a separate place where you've got your hosting and your domain name, and you then have to kind of host your website from your CMS into there. People might also be familiar with Shopify, which is a similar idea with HubSpot, where you go in on this package, so you pay, like you say, the monthly fee. And it is kind of, again, we should talk about the fact that HubSpot isn't for everybody. That, there are people that it won't be the right solution for, but in terms of ease of use and ease of setup, it is great that you just go in, set up in one place, set your domain up, get everything in place, host it there with HubSpot, and you're up and running. So it does take out several steps.
Yeah, and I think it takes out cost points that people don't always appreciate, because they always go, well, WordPress is free. Why do I want to pay all this money per month for HubSpot? But what they don't realise is they're not paying for hosting, they're not paying for the maintenance, they're not paying for backup. And if you're not backing up your WordPress site and you're not maintaining it, you've probably got a problem already with the security, you don't realise it. And then also CDNs as well, content delivery networks. That's all bundled, isn't it, in HubSpot?
Yeah, and it's interesting, like you're saying with the security, when you go with an all-in-one package, all those updates and things are happening in the background for you. So you don't have to go in with something like WordPress and do constant updates on all your plugins and things. It's just a platform that works. And
no plugin clashes as well. None of that horrendous, you update one plugin and suddenly your website breaks.
Doesn't work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's really good. So then if we're looking at ease of use and ease of setup, themes. Now, people often refer to WordPress and other things where, oh, well, I can buy a theme off the shelf. What's the situation with HubSpot when it comes to interface design?
So it's actually, there's a very similar setup in some ways. So you can go and get templates straight from their store. There are templates already available on the platform, so you can literally dive in. If you are literally working even from the very lowest free CRM and using the landing page feature, for example, you can dive in, set up a landing page using one of their templates within, I'd say, probably 5 minutes, and have a really modern looking responsive layout up and running. And it's the same with the templates throughout. You can go in and you can get email templates, you can get landing page templates. And in some ways, it has that same kind of open platform idea that you get from WordPress, but within the HubSpot ecosystem.
Wow, okay. So people shouldn't think, oh my God, we're going to go to HubSpot CMS. This is going to be, a nightmare. If you don't want it to be, you can go in and you can do that stuff. And at the same time, we've done a lot of custom design HubSpot CMS installs, so you've still got all that power and you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got the design features where you can go in, build something completely from scratch, add your own custom CSS sheets, have HTML-based templates. But those templates can then appear within the drag and drop editor and be used by your front end users. So that's where kind of you've got that customization, you've got that power that you can have a dev team come in and design you a site, and then your content creators can still use the front end and use the drag and drop system.
Okay, that's good. So that's the simplicity of setup. If we go to point 9 now, we're on to, which is actually multi-language, which is at the other end of the scale, because not that many people run multi-language websites. But so what's HubSpot's support for multi-language?
It's good. I mean, they're always adding to their languages, and they've got various kind of tools just in the system that you can use. So, for example, if you've built out a load of forms across your site, it has a translate option, so you can translate your forms into different languages, and you don't have to kind of go back through and recreate things and recreate your setup. So
wow,
yeah.
So you can forms you can have in your site, you can actually run them through and put them through a translate, so that you're not then having to create lots and lots of forms.
Yeah, exactly. And it still allows you to go in and customize and look for local dialects and get things the way you want it for those regions. Like we said before, sometimes regional teams are going to work differently, so you're not always going to want a straight like for like, but it definitely gives you a really solid base to start from.
Great. Okay, so really powerful then for multi-language installations. Okay, that's great. So then point 10, big thing for me, and I think big thing for Innovation Visual, because we're very, very strong on search optimization tools and AMP.
So they've got full AMP support, so that's great. We know that it's a way that a lot of the internet is going, and it needs to be there. It's very important in terms of kind of optimizing the site. But there's also a whole load of search tools and functionality within the platform that you can use. So there's SEO research tools. There's ways of structuring your content pillar pages and cluster content. And that's, again, it's all in there. It's all bundled. It's all part of the platform. And it just helps you because you can tag up individual pages within your site and say the topic of this page is X. These are the clusters that I'm building out, and it helps you map and therefore kind of do your attribution and your reporting based on what you've kind of mapped out.
Right. So it's giving you all the time. It's giving you a helping hand in terms of SEO all the way through, as well as having all that AMP stuff. That I have to say, I've seen some car crash AMP installations on WordPress with the various plugins that you can use with AMP, and you don't have to worry about any of that.
No, all in there. And again, it's worth highlighting, like with the SEO research and the tools that you get there, it does mean that you don't have to have additional platforms. So again, we talked about the cost. This can kind of factor into that as well, because all of these little tools, they do add up.
Yeah.
So to have that already in the platform, it's a good feature.
It's a saver. Great. So going through these, we talked about this is 12 reasons to go with the HubSpot CMS. We're now at 11 and 12, and so 11 I think migration help, because you've heard 10 reasons, which is right, it's great. Now you're thinking, well, actually, but I spent a load of money on another website. I like the look of it, but I want it on HubSpot CMS. What's the help when it comes to migration?
So, I mean, HubSpot themselves have support as well, but that's where people like us come in. So, we can obviously help you migrate content across, and it's not as painful as you think it's going to be. So, it's something that we can obviously facilitate and help guide and make sure it all goes across cleanly, because I think there's nothing worse than kind of having old data come across that isn't tidied up first as part of the approach, but it's something that can be done pretty quick, and you can have your site up and running with your content migrated across and ready to go pretty effortlessly.
And as we know from projects that we've done in collaboration with clients in HubSpot, they'll actually take a WordPress site, and as part of the deal, they'll actually migrate the CSS and the look and feel straight across if that's what a client wants. Yeah,
exactly. So it saves you that effort, saves you the thought of kind of getting a developer to come in and tweak something that was already ready to go. And get that across into the new platform.
Great. And then the nice little one to end on for number 12 is this magic blog migration tool that they've got, which is...
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? No one wants to be going through and setting stuff up from scratch and typing everything manually, and kind of, it's nice to be able to essentially click a couple of buttons and know it's just going to...
And it is literally that easy, isn't it? That you can just go, there it is, point the site at that, and away it goes.
No, exactly. Anyone that's done a migration before will know how frustrating it can be to be going over stuff that you've previously already done and just manually copying it across. So.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Right, so what we should say, so there's our 12 reasons why you should go to the HubSpot CMS. But let's just pause for a moment and say, what's it not good for? So who shouldn't look at the HubSpot CMS as the ideal solution? Because we are sort of independent in our advice. There are situations where it might not be the right.
Yeah, absolutely. So the most obvious one is I wouldn't build a big e-commerce platform on HubSpot. It could be done, but it's not what it's designed to do out of the box. We work with people on Magento and Shopify and WordPress with WooCommerce, and they all have a better offering for that functionality, which is not to say you can't still use HubSpot in that capacity, but you would be very much kind of plugging into the marketing tools of HubSpot and hosting your site with one of the other services. HubSpot really is in its strength when you're thinking kind of B2B websites. So, when we're looking at lead acquisition, building out landing pages and that sort of thing, that's where HubSpot is really in its own. And part of that is the data that we get in the back end and the marketing tools and the sales tools, but also just because it's not set up as something like an e-com site. So
yeah, I'd agree. I think if e-com site, don't even look at it. It's not even in the game, is it? Are there any other ones that you can see? Because for me, it's really only really like small people, not very ambitious, you know, they're kind of just putting a site up to tick a box. They're the ones that, you know, stick with your cheapo site.
Yeah, I would say so. You know, there is obviously a bit of a financial investment with HubSpot. It's not a dirt cheap tool, but you know, there are kind of free versions, like we said before. There is a completely free version where you can do basic landing pages. It's not a website. You know, we're not talking about the CMS at that point. We are talking about just a couple of tools that you can get your hands on. But I would say for most, you know, certainly for a lot of the clients we work with, it's definitely a really good option.
Yeah.
It's not to say it's the only option, but
yeah.
in terms of, you know, the 12 points we've been through, the connectivity, it's hard to beat.
Okay, so in terms of it's absolutely on the button when it's like it's the one that you want. What are we saying for that as the perfect fit for if you are blah, HubSpot CMS is the one for you?
So I mean, I would say anything from SME up to enterprise level B2B businesses, it's a game changer for a lot of them because of the integration they get, the data, and you know, it's hard to put your finger on what would be better.
So it's interesting there because I think a lot of people have previously thought HubSpot as not an enterprise level package, but you think it is?
So it's changed a lot over the last few years, big time. So it started as this, you know, this marketing tool, built out into a platform, became kind of a suite of apps, and now it's really becoming this kind of tech stack connector that is designed from the ground up really for enterprise. You know, it's built around data, and I think that's just something you can't retrofit to another platform. Wow.
Okay. Great. Well, there's 12 reasons why you should go with HubSpot for your CMS. I hope that's useful. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our email newsletters. And obviously, if you want any help with your HubSpot CMS or you're just considering it, please do get in touch because we'd happily advise you and give you some pointers. You can get in touch with Chris and myself through the Innovation Visual website. So please do drop us a message. Thanks very much for watching.